But what we really want to do is evaluate this first cohort term of working groups in general by listening to you all about some feedback and then talking about what next steps forward could look like. So I made a post in the working group leaders uh, group page. Did anybody get a chance to look at that?
Yes,
Cool. Val, you did. D.
yes.
I did, yes, ma'am.
Cool. And hey, Lauren.
Hey, sorry, I'm
Hey.
driving.
Yep. You don't have to have your camera on if you are driving. That's fine. Um, yeah, so we kind of me, Dolly, and Savannah spent a lot of time kind of trying to figure out what these different like headliners could be. And these are just kind of a starting place for the conversation. We didn't want this to sprawl into infinite places, and so we just kind of picked these like nine. But what's going to be asked of all of you is, even if we finish the evaluation process in this meeting and the next, we are still asking that all working group leaders complete the Google form that I either linked or will link in the group. And the Google form allows you, first of all, to answer two really quick evaluation questions. It's those simple, did you learn anything? Will you apply what you
Mm-hmm.
learned? And then it also has space for you to add more thoughts that you weren't able to add today. And if you weren't able to, maybe it's because you didn't feel comfortable sharing in the group, maybe we didn't have time, or maybe you thought of it later. So if you don't have additional things to add, you don't need to fill out those components. But if you do, then we'd love to hear it. And so we have already started this process, or we completed this process with the Food Access Working Group because they had their meeting on Tuesday. You guys are our second meeting, and then eventually we'll end with economic development. And then the culmination is going to be at that September 25th event. That's going to be an in-person feedback and social. So it's going to be two parts. We are going to kind of present the aggregate of what we heard across all three working groups and across those forms that you submitted.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're also going to celebrate the success of our first cohort. There is a PDF that is more detailed than the presentation that you see on your screen. We're gonna kind of try to go through this quickly just to go through it. But like I said, we highly encourage you to read that PDF, which has more details, and then for you to contribute any ideas that weren't able to be collected through this process. Before we begin, does anybody have any questions on that kind of like strategy?
No.
Cool. Thanks, Val.
That sounds
All right.
perfect.
Thanks, Lauren. Okay, cool. Then we'll go ahead and start. So the first kind of segment was the determination of working groups. So how did we even get to these working groups? How we did it for this first cohort was that at the end of 2024, we had a network-wide survey that we asked all of our partners to take. And at that time, it was when we had the six program ambassadors, Savannah being one of them. And you were to schedule a one-on-one and kind of talk about your experience. And then we asked people to rank out of five options to rank their top three. So those top three ended up being food access, food production, and economic development. So that was what we decided to turn the first working groups. We're like, okay, if people voted for this, then there obviously is enough interest and capacity to create these working groups. And so, while the three working groups have been great, some feedback that we've heard and some suggestion that we might have. Oh, I guess I need to clarify this too. Our suggestions are not the final endpoint. This is just what the three of us brainstormed, but we already heard from Food Access that some of the suggestions that we had didn't really jive with what they wanted. And so that's totally fine. That's what this process is all about. And so kind of what we're going to do is we're going to recap what we did last time, provide our suggestions, and then hear your suggestions. And your suggestions do not need to be ours. They can be totally different. It won't hurt our feelings. We want you to be brutally honest. We all have love and appreciation for each other, and so we're not taking this as a critical, mean evaluation. We're taking it as honest feedback from you all to make a better program. So our suggestion would be to have one large working group. And instead of having a topic specific working group like food access or economic development or food production, to have a general food systems working group. And in that, it would be up to individual actors to advocate for the things that they care about. So if food access is the thing that, and of course, we all care about everything, right? That's kind of one of the issues is that food system work is so intersectional that it can be really hard to specify like what exactly your like niche is. But you know, from your, I guess, your vantage point. So if you're a dietitian, then health is going to be something that you just prioritize because of the work you do. If you are a food producer, then food production is going to be something that you prioritize. If you are a small business, then economic development might be. So instead of us assigning specific working group topics, we were thinking of having one at-large food system group. So, with that being said, now we're going to open it for discussion and hear back from you all. And so you can comment on the process before, what you think would be good in the future. And this is specific to the determination of working groups and kind of how many working groups there should be. And the answer could be five. If you think we should have more working groups, that's fine too. We'll go ahead and jot that down. But yeah, so what do you think? Oh, Val, you're muted.
Thanks. In general, I think overall it's a good idea because it appeared to me that people that were in our working group were also attending other working groups just to kind of stay in the loop of what was happening in the other sections. So with one large working group, I would think we would be able to like subsection into teams.
Committees, yep, yep.
And then maybe those teams get together, work, and then report in at the time that we have the big meeting. And maybe your meeting will be a little longer because it's larger, but it will help everybody kind of stay in the loop. That's just my opinion.
I think that's a great opinion. Hey, Dolly or Savannah, is anybody taking these notes? Okay, cool, Savannah. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's and that is something that food access was a little apprehensive to having one large working group just because they're worried about like basically, you know, the dilution of a specific niche, but the idea of having teams, committees, project groups like you proposed kind of underneath that then report back to this larger working group. So I think that's a really good idea. Dee or Lauren, do you guys have any input?
I
Yeah, I do.
agree. Like that was my thought as well. Go ahead, Lauren.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with Val. The thing is, there's so many times, like just, because you have a specific interest, you need the cooperation and everything of the other groups. And because very rarely is one thing just one dimensional in that specific topic. So the idea of having it as one group with the subcommittees makes perfect sense. And I think it'd be more cohesive. And I'm guessing things would get done. Um, it would be a smoother process in the long run. So I definitely back what Val said. That's when I was reading over the page, I was like, wow, that's like brilliant. So
Cool. Thanks. Thanks for that input.
Same
And
thought. And I just think that it would be, we would actually, like you said, get stuff done. But I think it would also be a better use of time, resources, and it'll be efficient. I really feel like, because again, we're not splitting up. And then you guys are doing, well, Savannah's doing a lot of like, attending of meetings and stuff. It would just be boom.
totally, totally. And that is, and we'll talk about this kind of as this process goes on, but like the the elephant in the room of meetings, like every like people like want to both work faster and more, but also are unable to find meeting times. And so
Mhm.
we were thinking that if we had one working group and we had one meeting. And so Val, you mentioned maybe that meeting is longer. Do you think it'd be longer than 2 hours?
No, I
You think
think
two
two,
hours?
as long as the subgroups remain more or less 4 or 5, so
Yeah.
everybody has 10 to 15 minutes each for presentation. Um, that would be fine. It's just, and I think we're disciplined enough at this point, as it shows in our meetings, that we come in with an agenda. We already have direction. We start on time, and we get right to the point. We don't just chit chat and socialize and stuff. So
Yeah,
as long as we stay within those parameters, I think we would do well.
wonderful. Cool. Well, before we move on to the next kind of segment, does anybody else have any final closing thoughts on um
Yeah,
yep. Oh, hey
I had
Georgia.
a
Hey.
question.
Yeah.
Hey, I see what the food access group was saying. And yeah, I had the same concerns, but I also thought like Val, like what if there were committees? And I think I just would have more questions on like the nuance of how all of that would work, right? So how do those committees work? Things like that. I think there's lots of overlap, so I like the idea of sort of coming together. I think the working group leaders tried to do that a little bit on our own. But some of the hangups were just we didn't get full attendance in those meetings with just the co-chairs. And so I think that also made it a little harder. I know what you mean by like people don't want to do the meetings. I think though it's also really hard for us to do meaningful work and not get together. And so just by saying like that elephant in the room, I think that's definitely something that is a little bit I don't know, like what you were saying. Like I think that's something that needs to be looked at in some ways because I think there's been a lot of times where people don't want to do the meetings or be in person and things like that, but I do think there's a lot of meaningful aspects to it. That yeah, and sometimes it's not easy, but I do think like us meeting in person had a lot of good impact. And but I love the idea of committees. I think like that sort of some kind of hybrid of still having those special interests, but then having uh everybody come together as well because of the overlap. So I don't know what the answer looks like either, I guess, but that was just kind of what I wanted to say was like I think there's yeah, and I had a lot of benefit of I was one of those people that went to lots of the other meetings. And some of that was because we were still figuring things out. And so I wanted to see how is that group functioning? What do I like or not like about what they're doing? Um but then also it was for the overlap. So yeah, I mean, I think that that's yeah, I think we just have to figure out like what how much time can people commit because it is difficult, but I think there's also no other way for us to actually be effective without
Yeah.
putting the time in.
Those are good. Those are good thoughts. Thank you for sharing those. And then Lauren, I see you're coming off
I'm here.
screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have more to contribute to this topic?
No, I think what I was thinking about might have more to do with a topic that we're going to talk about shortly, about like, people, if we do have a new um, format and everything, then the people who want to be involved, they need to like agree to meet and things like that, so it's going to be, if it's a new structure, then the structure just has to be presented. And if the people want to be interested, then they're going to say, yeah, I can meet on a regular basis. And
Oh, did we lose her? Is everybody else there? Am I frozen?
I'm
No,
here.
No, just
Okay.
Lauren.
Okay.
yeah.
Is it
we'll
me or her?
address
Okay.
those things so we can keep going, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I got the gist. Okay, cool. Next slide. Thank you for those contributions, Lauren. Okay, cool. Lauren, you're unfrozen now. We got, I think we caught everything you were saying, and I will say, we did have agreements, and like when the working groups first started, the first task for the working group was to decide a meeting time. And so in theory, that was something that like we didn't decide these times. We allowed the working group leaders to, and then everyone also did sign like commitment letters. And so some of the stuff we do have already created, did we actually like operationalize it? That, that's a question left to be discovered, but we'll kind of talk about that more throughout this process. So the next segment was application for and selection of the working group members. And so what we did with the first cohort, many of you being kind of part of it from the very beginning, was that we had opened an application process. Me, Savannah, and Dahlia reviewed those applications, and then we ended up selecting the 5 working groups leaders across 3 group, so 15 total. We always intended for this second cohort to be elected by their peers. So for the first working group, we just needed to get something out on the track. And so we just decided that, okay, we're gonna kind of make the selection and start it, but by the time this next cohort rolls around and for the future, it will be nominations
Mhm.
and peer-to-peer advancement. So we will not be reviewing applications anymore and making those decisions. It will be up to the network on how they want to do that. So, and then also just like a little bit of kind of background on how we made those selections. Our application asked questions like, what position do you want? And with co-chairs being paid and other positions not being paid, we also asked if you are applying for the co-chair position, but you don't get the co-chair position, would you still want to be part of this group? And so we had to, I mean, like literally, we printed out applications and we had a giant table and we were trying to match, like, okay, so this person wants to be a co-chair, but they don't want to be part of the group if they're not paid. And so it was like a pretty extensive process. But like I said, that was just for the first time. That was not our intention going forward. So what we suggest is that um, August, the last, the second August, being this evaluation period that we're doing now. September, kind of wrapping it up, and also getting nominations from you all for people that you think would be good working group leaders. You can also self-nominate. So if you would like to continue being a working group leader, which we would love all of you all to want to continue to do, then you can self-nominate or you can nominate a peer. And so in September, kind of having you guys lead on that in this kind of like final hurrah that we're having. And then we'll also open nominations to the whole network in October. And that will be done through a platform post. So on October 1st, we'll say we're accepting nominations for working group leaders. When people are nominated, we'll reach out to them and say, hey, Val, you've been nominated by your peers. Do you accept it or reject it? And you can say, great, I accept it. Or you can say, oh, unfortunately, next year I don't have the time, so I'm gonna decline the opportunity. And so just because you are nominated doesn't mean you are forced to do it. You have to accept it if you want to. And then in voting, so nominations will be collected through October, and then starting on November 1st, people can start to cast their ballots for who they believe these working group leaders should be. Um, and then voting will continue through the end of Wednesday of the conference. So our annual conference is going to be in November, mid-November, and then ideally on Thursday morning at the brunch and potluck, we'll be announcing next year's working group leaders. Then in December, those newly elected working group leaders will take the online courses that we have through HHU, plus a few additional courses that were not created by us, but were created by the Food System Leadership Network that are specific to working group leadership. So these are resources that already exist. They're very similar to the online modules. They're probably way better. But so some way that in December, newly elected working group leaders can, on their own schedule, on their own timeline, learn these kind of foundations so that way everyone is on a standardized starting place. So with that, go back one slide. With that being said, what do you all think about the application and selection process? And do you like our suggestion or do you have a different suggestion?
I would like to
I like
just
a
add some.
combination. Oh, go ahead, Val.
Oh, I would just like to add that perhaps in that process, as a preliminary, you do some kind of intro flyer or marketing, so that especially new people into the group have an idea first what the group's about and what the positions are, and what you're looking for, or mostly. And I'm speaking from somebody that came in as a new person, and it was difficult for me to kind of put all the little pieces together to see how they all worked together. So perhaps maybe if we can do something where we can send out a flyer and so people who are interested can respond to that flyer, and then from there, maybe we could go through some kind of nomination and process.
Cool. Yeah, I think that we can definitely do that. And we might ask for your help in designing that. So that way, some of the things that you wish you had known, we can make sure we include. Um, so yeah, and Val, I want to say I am really appreciative of you kind of like sticking with it because I know that when you first joined, it was a little bit like, what? But you have continued to show up to meetings, and I think that it's kind of become more clear, and especially with your contribution of leadership, I think it's all kind of, and that's the deal with this first cohort is that like we told you many times that we were laying down the track one
Mhm.
step ahead. So we didn't really know what we're doing either, which is why this process is really important to us to hear this feedback. So okay, that's a great idea, Val. Dee, you had something to add as well?
Yeah, I like the application process. So those that are interested that maybe aren't as active right now can do that, can apply to become a leader. And then I like the election. I like the nominating of those people. So people that want to do it that aren't nominated can still apply to do it. And then maybe they join that ballot. So it's going to be
So
like, like student government type thing, like, hey, this is me and this is what I stand for. They do a little video, submit that, and we can vote.
totally. And so with that, we are really trying to differentiate Homegrown Hillsborough staff in this decision-making process. So,
Mhm.
with the application process, who would be reviewing those applications? Would it be a committee? Would it be the previous working group leaders that are doing that in
Mhm.
October? Like, who would be reviewing these applications?
I
I
would
think
say
the
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 prior
current
leads.
working group, yeah,
The current working group leaders?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then
Yeah. Okay.
what if they're running? Like what if they're submitting applications?
Well,
Well,
they
then
can
they,
just
they-
exempt themselves. That's all.
Just
yeah,
not review their own, just review the others, you mean?
Right.
yeah.
I have a question. What is the difference in self-nomination and application?
So we're not currently envisioning with a self-nomination any kind of application. So it would just be a set of criteria in the sense that like, yes, I'm available this number of hours. Yes, I understand what the role is. And I want to I am putting myself on the ballot to be voted for. Whereas an application is the what we did in the past, which is like, why do I want to be a working group leader, right? Like, how do I want to contribute to the food system? Which that I forget the questions we asked, which that would then require evaluation, right? Someone to say, yeah, this is best reason, right? Um, and we remember none of this is so none of this is set in stone, right? So if
Mhm.
there is an application process that requires minimal review or a like we can establish that self-nomination or application process, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Savannah?
Okay.
Suggestion. So instead of having like applications for people to review, you could have an application that everyone just sees. So it's like everyone answers the same question, and then it's kind of like a booklet, like what they do, for like elected officials sometimes is like everyone answers the same questions, so everyone can just review it. And then it's just open. So when you go to vote, you can go and look at what everyone's answers are. And there's not like we're not disqualifying anyone, but if someone chose not to answer them, they just have blank answers.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense to me, and that was where my brain started to go as well.
And
Cool.
so, I mean, would it be like, name Monica Petrella. Why do you want to be a food system leader? I want to be a food system leader because I believe that I can contribute a certain amount of peppiness that can get us across the finish line. What strengths do you bring? I really like using Excel. And then so having that be published. And so, but like just a few questions you're thinking?
Yeah,
Yeah,
not too many.
Yeah. So I
that's
guess
that's
we'd
where my brain, yeah.
and then we could publish those. Okay. Because like what we're also thinking is the reality is that when what we were thinking is if we go with this whole November election period, then when we do check-in for the conference, we're gonna say, Val, actually Val does her homework, so but like, hey Val, welcome to the conference. We see you haven't, like actually we're not gonna track who's voted, but like if you have not voted yet, I guess we would need to. track who's
Yeah, you
voted.
would probably need to
Yeah.
track it.
Yeah. Okay. So anyways, Val, we've noticed you haven't submitted your selections yet. Stand right over here. We have the place where you can go read about the nominees and go cast your ballot, and that would probably be a Google form. But so that we're imagining that we'll probably get 30% of the network to vote ahead of time, but that the bulk of
Hmm.
it will come in at that check-in process at the conference because that is kind of our big summit of everyone getting together. Um,
Think that's a
so
really good idea.
Yeah.
okay, and so with that, we'd probably have to have some kind of like poster board printed or like, yeah, a pamphlet or something that people could read quickly while they're reviewing these applicants.
Why don't you
What
send
if
that
it's
out ahead
something
of
like
time?
a
Yeah, we could do that. I will tell you, people don't read things ahead of time, but yes, we could do that.
what if
I
it's
think if
Lauren,
like
we
for
have like a
anyone that is
packet, like what
actually
you're saying is, sorry, D, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just thinking like a packet, or especially if those are short answer questions. So having, like we often do, word count, maximum, so that people can read through it and it doesn't turn into like a flowery sort of essay.
yeah,
Hmm.
But that would take away the burden of who's reviewing
yeah,
Hmm.
um to the voters. And but yeah, it could be either something printed, uh like let's say it's 3 pages long or something like that.
yeah.
Then you could have a few of them printed as people vote. I'm not really sure, but um I think that that makes the most sense to me, because especially if you don't know somebody,
Hmm.
it would be nice to be able to see their thoughts uh without having to know them, if especially if they are newer.
Yeah. And we are also hoping that at the conference, people will go and say, "Hi, Georgia. My name is Monica, and I'm running for working group leadership, and I hope that you'll vote for me." Like, we hope that there is some campaigning that does go on because that's kind of how it's done in the real world.
Yeah.
But who knows? D, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking that it would be more of a visual because, like you said, people don't read. Like no one's reading. So if you are nominated or running for self reflection, oh Lord, I lost the word. Self
Nomination, yeah.
that word. Then you submit your 30-second video pitch of why you're running, who you are. People can see the face to the name. Does that make sense? Because a lot of people, like when we interact in like the summits and things like that, I may not remember someone's name, but if I see their face, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that person. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
I think that like little campaign, everybody submit their video by whatever date it is that's due, and then that's sent out to the platform or the what are we calling the thing? The network. There we
Okay.
go. To
Yeah.
the network and post it on the platform. Then people have that opportunity to get to know the candidates and then cast their vote, either whether in person at the conference or via whatever the forms are that are
Yeah.
created. Because I'm not reading all that stuff. If it's more than like a minute and a half, I'm not
Yeah.
reading it.
And I do think that we would keep it short. It would be like, why do you want to be a food system leader? And like, what strengths do you have or something, and like we could obviously workshop those more. But yeah, I would imagine it would be pretty short. But that's a good idea. At least maybe having like a upload a profile picture and then we can have that next to or a video. What I'm worried about with that is just aggregating it, sending it, giant files, people not being able to watch certain things, where is this being stored, how is this being accessed? But we could try, we could try.
I'm also the opposite
Okay.
of D, where I would rather read through a few different questions than watch a bunch of videos, because I'm more of like sometimes a skimmer,
Yeah,
um, or to do it at my own pace, whereas a video you
yeah,
can't, I don't know, fast forward through it. But yeah, I think like you said, having it short either direction is still like sort of workable, right? So as long
yeah.
as they're not 5 minute.
But you guys are advocating for some kind of application, even if that application is because what we talked about with the food access working group was they weren't really interested in the application of why would you be a good fit. They were more interested in having people that are nominated or self-nominated, anybody that accepts this nomination to basically commit to the standards. Like, so, you will attend these meetings, you will be on time, you will do the work that's expected of you, you will treat people with respect, like those kind of more like contract things than an actual like why do you want this position? So it's good. This is why we're getting feedback across all the groups. So Savannah's got those notes down. Anybody else have anything to add about this application and selection of working group members?
I think
Um,
my thought on what you were just saying, Monica, is just that that would be part of like what Dahlia was saying. Like I think if you nominated or right, that's like a standard, that's a part of the contract, and then holding people more to that, or I think one thought I had about would you participate if you're not a working group leader, to me that would almost say maybe they're not going to be the most committed leader if they're not willing to do it. And so sort of looking for maybe some of those, I forget what it's called, but like those hoops to jump through to make sure that they are going to come to the meetings and show up mentally, things like that, where it was my thought. But that's where I also thought maybe that sort of question and answer would give some of that, right?
Yep.
So anyways, that's kind of my last
Cool.
thought on it. That's it.
Cool. And then
uh,
D, I think you had something as well.
I have a quick
Nope,
thought.
we're
No,
good.
I'm good.
Oh, Lauren, sorry, Lauren did. Okay. I heard somebody.
My thing was because most people won't know like everybody that they're reading about, and so I like the idea of everything being sort of like like what Georgia said. You're sort of skimming, but you're reading the same things about the person. So somebody might be looking for somebody who has, an experience in a certain area, or but what long story short, what I'm trying to say is, should there be anything that the question of like, have you served in this capacity before and want to continue it? Because to me, that's sort of, I think that would be important. The people that have done this and have committed to it, they should be able to, you should be able to differentiate between people that have done the work and people who maybe, are interested in it, which is, you know, it's
And
just,
I agree. So when we've been building this process, when we've gotten stuck or like asked like, okay, like how should we do this? We often will go, well, how do they do it in the real world? And so like it's kind of like when you have an incumbent that's running for their seat, that generally benefits them because people know them because they've been involved in this work. And so like people that have know that you guys have been involved in this work because they've seen you make the posts or host the events or, do the projects. So when they see your name again on the ballot, they're going to say, "Oh, I know Val because I because she's invited me to this event because she reached out to me about this opportunity." And so that like kind of naturally like supports itself. Also, like we said, like it is on the candidates to kind of like go around and be like, "Hi, my name is Georgia and I'm running for re-election. I held this position last year and I'd really love your support so I can do it again next year." So like I said, we kind of thought about that too. Like, do we have like a weighted way for like people that have served already get like extra points? But then, like I said, we talked and we were like, well, how does this happen in the real world? And it's like, oh, well, no, like just having name recognition from previously serving generally benefits you. Yeah.
no,
Yeah,
that
it's
makes sense.
I think that works a lot too, just looking at sort of the food sovereignty market is one that I think about, right? So there's students, there's no monetary benefit, right, to participating for them, but the
Mhm.
way that I know the new leadership from their participation in previous years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that's yeah, I think that kind of makes sense. I think it could go either way too, though, as far as like some people are just more outgoing than others, but there are lots of ways for people who are more, let's say, introverted to still have their name recognized by doing the work, right? It doesn't mean that you're up and talking in front of everybody or going and like campaigning in that way, but your name can still be out there. Like you said, you're either hosting an event, you're attending an event. It's a small enough group that I think we would get to know each other. So I think that makes a lot of sense to me,
Even
what you
something
said.
like the secretary, which is kind of more of a quiet role, like they're the ones that are publishing the events online. So like
Yeah.
people know that Amanda Alafara is the secretary for the Economic Development Working Group because she's the one that's sending the invites. So like your name is associated with this just because you're the one that's actually doing the work. So we're gonna move
Yeah.
on just because of time. But if you do have other like contributions, then like I said, the form will be the place to fill that out. And we want to hear all of your thoughts. And you might not like if the thoughts come to you later, then we want all of that collected. The form will be open for a long time and you can submit it. And then if you have more things to say, just go ahead and submit another one and we'll aggregate all of it. So the next topic is how we onboarded working group leaders. And so what we did for this first cohort was that we had a 2-day in-person retreat at Extension. We did things like took headshots, we discussed leadership styles, we talked about collective impact, we talked about community development. We had a section on grant writing, and then we talked about STAR goals. So STAR goals are specific, time-bound, achievable, and attainable and realistic. Relative, I think. And that cost us $4,000. And that's because we paid for food, that's because we paid for speakers, that's because we paid for the person that took the headshots. And so, those of you that were at that, that was what a $4,000 event looks like, and that doesn't even include a venue fee. What we suggest for next time is that, kind of like I said earlier, having December kind of be the part one of the onboarding. And so when we onboarded our working group leaders last time, we didn't have the online courses, those foundational courses about what is the food system and what is Homegrown Hillsborough. And so we would require our working group leaders to take those. If you have already taken them, you obviously don't need to take them again. But then also having a leadership course or two that would, like they said, the Food System Leadership Network is already like a nonprofit that exists, and we've skimmed some of their online modules that seem really relevant to this work. So December would kind of be part one of onboarding, and then we would have an in-person retreat one day instead of two, where we would do things like take headshots, meet in real life, at the actual like humanization of all of it, talk about some of the things that we learned online, but not necessarily spend like we wouldn't be reviewing the sectors in detail again. We would just come in and say, you all should have taken these modules online. You all should know the 6 sectors. Now let's talk about how we do intersectional work, And so the goal would be to have less commitment in butts and seats and have that be more of on your own schedule throughout December, but to create some kind of standardization. And so now we want to hear what you all think.
I
I
have
think
thoughts, and it's kind of
go ahead.
tying the two together. It would be requiring anyone that wants to be a working group leader have already completed those prerequisites that are online. They would have already watched that and things like that prior to applying.
Ooh,
But everything else I like.
I like that a
That's
lot.
Yeah,
really,
it,
that's interesting because I feel like that might scare people away. Because if they're like already
it,
on the, like, do I want to be a leader? I don't know. I'm kind of scared. Now I have homework. No, thank you.
No, because if
No,
they
but
are
then
going to
you'll
have
get their
homework and they
commitment.
need to be ready to do it.
Yeah, just the
This is good
leadership.
feedback. This is really
Yeah.
good feedback. Yeah, yeah.
I see what
but
you're saying, Monica, but I have to agree with Dee. I think like it could be one of those hoops, right? I forget like there's a name for it where you give them a task to make sure that they're willing to do things.
A
Yeah.
structure test.
Yes, thank you. A structure
Yep.
test. And so yeah, I totally agree with Dee. I think that would
it
be yeah.
it sounds like it's a two-level learning uh, format, and the first level would be self driven learning through the modules. And then when you come into your one-on-one, you would focus on what's going on. And by the time individuals get to that point, they've already gone through the introduction and talking to people and signing up. So it's not like they're just walking off the street right into this leadership group.
Yeah. Yeah. Georgia?
I had a lot of benefit from the 2-day
Okay.
orientation. I I noticed a lot of because there were people that I knew and people I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I actually really liked it being 2 days for a couple reasons. The first day when we don't know each other, you might talk to a couple people, but not really. The second day, I think, is when I really started to talk to more people. And And then like in December, which I know is far away from March, that is when like I really started to feel more of that, like, oh, having lunch with other working groups and things like that. And just kind of organically. So I don't know if it could look like 2 days where it's not as much review, but maybe that social aspect. I think that went a long way with us being able to communicate in between meetings. And like I really like Dee's idea of like, yeah, you should have already completed this, and that's great. And then we did some practical applications in that 2 day orientation. One of them was with the guy that talked about the collective impact.
Mm-hmm.
Where
Brian, maybe?
that sounds maybe Brian,
Yeah.
maybe I don't know.
Might
I
have
have
been
a
Lucas or
day, but
Brian. I don't remember.
Yeah, because
Luke,
John was there, but
yeah,
it was Lucas, maybe? Yeah.
Lucas.
yeah. So yeah, I liked some of that stuff we did, and it got people to open up a little bit more. I don't remember all of it. Like I don't remember why we had one or two people at a time sitting up at the front.
Yeah.
And it wasn't my favorite thing, but I do remember learning a lot about people while they were doing it. And again, I think um there's just a lot to that, like in person and getting to know each other a little bit, right? Like, it doesn't have to be a full on social group, but I do think that there was a lot of, for me at least, I felt like there was a lot of benefit in getting to do those things and talk to those people. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. No, that's really good feedback. Thank you.
It
Yeah.
makes sense. I'm the opposite. I feel like 2 days was overkill.
Hmm.
If I'm being honest, I feel
Totally.
like it's overkill, especially if you are someone in a working capacity. To have to dedicate that time for that many hours for 2 days is a little bit difficult. So I find like one day, maybe half a day, if we've already done like all the prerequisite stuff, then there's less information to get in person. It's more of that social gathering. It's the headshots and things of that nature that are required, is your contract signing, all of those things.
Yeah.
And maybe one of those things, I forget the lady's name, but she was really, really good. It was the African American lady. She
At the
talked
very end.
about,
Yeah.
yeah, she was amazing. When we went through and we did the group, the activities on the wall, remember
Yeah.
that?
I forgot her name too.
I thought that was
Savannah found
helpful.
her, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that was helpful. So I feel like a half a day in person is the perfect amount of time for those that are still on the corporate clock, and time is limited.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it was hard to find that time, but I did find the 2 days really beneficial. And I had the same point of view as D when we were doing it. I was like, oh my God, 2 days.
Hmm.
But like looking back, I guess, is where and same thing with like the 2 hour meetings. Sometimes I felt like, oh my gosh, but now looking back and seeing the benefits that came from being in person, those things I think helped me to be more committed, helped me to feel more comfortable uh speaking up and talking and reaching out. And so, yeah, I know like it is hard to make that time, and I agree, but I also felt like it was actually one of the more worthwhile aspects of it, as opposed to getting together to go over sort of the slides. Was, yeah, like that's something we can do on our own, but that sort of social aspect. So even if it's like 2 half days or something along those lines. There was something about it being two that for me made it like on the second one a little less or more interactive.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that that is something that like when you get such a big brain dump and then you go home and you have time to kind of like sit and reflect by yourself, like literally go to sleep and let your brain recover, and then you come back and now you're ready to kind of like it's like when you're like building muscle, like you go for fatigue and then you rest and recover and then you can go for fatigue. It's like the same thing. And so having those 2 days, that is kind of the intention behind that, where it's like, okay, we're gonna dump a bunch of information on you because the reality is that like the stuff that we all need to kind of like learn is stuff that people go to like graduate school for. Like it's not like an easy, formula. You just do it and here it's done. And so it is really good to hear, Georgia, your reflection from like when you were in it in the moment and then to now, because I will say that like we do listen to you all when you tell us things. And so in our mind, we were like, okay, 2 days was way too much and we need to reconfigure that. And so it is good to hear that like a little bit of hindsight makes you think differently. So yeah, and whether that is what we decide to do or not, we'll figure that out. But thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was something I was kind of surprised by, or, maybe not surprised, but yeah, just thinking about like my impression of everybody and how I got to know even people I already knew, like Dee and Kenny, from before to after the working group, right? And
Yeah.
so I just remember, especially in December, feeling that value, and then uh sometimes I feel like lost at conferences because I'm just a one person or two-person organization now. And so it was nice to like, I think I ended up having lunch with most of like the food access group or something,
Hmm.
and I didn't know them. And so like there is, I don't know, there's just a lot of benefit to it there. And I agree it is really hard to do it, and to make that time. But I think that's also maybe one of those structure
Yeah.
test, right? And
Yeah.
because it did, I don't know. Anyways, I feel like I'm just repeating myself, but yeah, that was kind of all I wanted to
Yeah.
say.
I'm picking up what you're laying down. Cool. We're gonna move to the next segment. If anybody has any quick final thoughts on this, and then we'll probably only be able to get through the next one. And so yeah, this will be kind of our last one that we'll talk about, and then we'll continue this conversation at your next working group meeting. But like I said, feel free in between to read the PDF that has more information on this. You can submit your first round of contributions or wait until after that meeting. But yeah, just because it's not covered today doesn't mean that we don't want to hear it from you. So this next section is determining goals and strategies of the working groups. So what we did for the first cohort was that you all applied in January, you were accepted in February, March was the leadership retreat, and then April was your first meeting. And at your first meeting, Savannah was very much trying to get everybody to create their STAR goals. So April was intended to kind of brainstorm what those goals would look like, but then May, we wanted everyone to leave the May meeting with their STAR goals. And so it was pretty aggressive. I think it was a little maybe chaotic just because it was literally the first working group meetings we ever had. And so to come in with such like important homework, but also without goals, you don't have direction. And so we thought that that would be important to start with. What we would suggest going forward is that instead of starting with a blank canvas, and I mean, I sat in on the food access working group, and I remember literally Savannah had a expo marker in her hand and a blank whiteboard and said, "Okay, tell me your goals." And that was hard because like when you have infinite options, it's hard to pick one. So what we would maybe encourage is to spend more time looking at food system plans that have already been created and published by other communities. So there are hundreds of food system plans that are at the city, county, state, regional level. And those plans are usually done by consultants who know how to create very specific goals and usually have action steps to complete them. And we don't need to copy and paste their goals, but by using those as starting points, by really like going to a food action plan that a group has already spent. I mean, sometimes these things are like 18-month long processes and they consist of hundreds of interviews and they market research and feasibility studies. And so obviously our community is different than any other community because that's how communities work. But by using that as a starting place and then um, amending it to fit our circumstances, or just to use that as a starting point and say, okay, this goal sounds good, but let's go figure out if it even fits for us. So that would kind of be what we would do is probably really spend the first few meetings just learning from others. Instead of kind of like going straight to the whiteboard with the expo marker, really spending time maybe talking to other food policy councils or talking to a urban ag specialist or whatever that would be. So what do you all think?
I think maybe that could be part of that. Also, 2-day orientation is maybe
That's fine.
some. That's where I would say like a video could be more helpful is to look at some of these or even a field trip to something to see what these different operations look like. I know we've talked about 4 routes as a group before, and that's a really lofty goal, but I think like it could be interesting to do like that could be a social aspect where we get to take a field trip, see what that looks like, but also review other ones too that might be, but I like the idea of the information gathering because I think that's what we ended up doing in those first few meetings anyway, was information gathering as opposed to setting those goals. And I think that we all wanted to, yeah, like it was a really wide open net, and so it was uh we needed to do that information gathering. I think in some ways then it felt like we weren't succeeding because we didn't do what we were setting out to do. But so yeah, so maybe if we just set it up differently where the goal is information gathering before setting those goals, but I do really like the idea of like looking at what's already out there and how they did it and seeing as to like what does make sense for our, our area.
Thanks. Anyone else? Any thoughts on goals or
I agree. It
go
did
on?
actually. It was no. I think that maybe with the sorry, I just can come back on camera now. The dog's gone. Doing looking at what you said with the other organizations, other states, but also trying to look at some of the things that the existing groups started and may not have gotten to that they'd like
Mhm.
to see worked on by the new leadership group. So I think that that would be important as well because work was already done to kind of like start that process and maybe the project didn't get completed or ran out of money or whatever the case may be for what's already been started by the current working group.
That's smart. Like somehow integrating like previous working groups like goals, and for the next like somewhere we need to kind of have some like document that somebody who is brand new to the working groups that might not have any idea about what you three working groups have accomplished over the last year can like reflect and see like, oh, okay, this was like the path they were traveling down. Like, do we want to continue this or not?
Yeah.
Cool.
I think that kind of exists in maybe not in completion. There's like parts of it that exist everywhere, but yeah, maybe it would be nice to have that all into one place. And that could be part of the um that reviewing the other systems and other
Yeah.
projects, right? Is reviewing ours as well, because I think like there's a lot to take away from the goals that we did set and a lot to take away from looking at other um models. And so because I think that was something that would have benefited us a lot was having other models to look at, but I think sometimes I know that those were put out there. That's where I think sometimes the reading was a bit heavy at times. And so maybe having something a little bit more accessible time wise, because I did like them. I think there was a lot of benefit again to those readings, but also in that moment I was like, oh my gosh. But after I read them I was like, okay, that was interesting. And so having something where like we're all getting a little bit on the same footing, sort of like the orientation, but more in the vein of like, here's what other things look like and what of these other things would we like to see here,
Hmm.
or what of those aspects would help us.
Cool. We only have 4 minutes left and we still have to evaluate. So we're going to kind of put a pause on this part and we'll do the PALS evaluation. And then we'll continue all of this at the next meeting. So thank you for sharing all of your feedback. This has been really, really good for me to hear and really insightful. So I appreciate it. And then Savannah, if you want to take over.
Yeah, totally. All right, let me share my screen so you can just see it. Maybe. Oh my gosh. Okay. get to the right tab that I have open. All right. For our pals, participation. Did people participate? What do you think, D, 1 through 5?
5.
Georgia?
Or we're missing somebody.
So 4? Sorry.
Yeah, 4.
Okay, thanks. Val
5.
and Lauren.
5.
All right. What did we accomplish? Item D.
If we're going based on the number of questions that we actually completed, I would go with like a 3.
All right. Georgia?
I think a 5. I don't know that we really thought we were going to finish today.
Okay. Val?
I say a 5 because of the interaction that we did complete our goal of having that interaction.
All right. And Lauren?
5. I think everything that we discussed thoroughly. So I think that was a
Mhm.
win.
Gotcha. All right. What about listening? Were we focused and mindful? D?
5.
Georgia?
5.
Val?
5.
And Lauren?
5.
Great. And last one. Did we stick to our agenda and use our time wisely? D?
Absolutely. 5.
Georgia?
5.
5.
And Lauren?
5.
All right. Great. Thank you very much. And then our next meeting is on the 27th, in person at the North Tampa Branch Library, and then also in September, Friday the 25th, I believe, we will be in person.
Awesome.
Awesome.
For a social, so that'll be fun.
Yes.
Thanks again, everybody, for your contribution, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
guys.
you.
Shalom.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Thanks. Bye.